The shattering of glass echoed through the dusty Rose saloon as Winifred Zimmerman ducked behind the bar, fragments of a whiskey bottle raining down where she'd stood moments before. It was 1878 in Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, and this wasn't the first time her appearance had made her a target for the cruel taunts of drunken cowboys. "Come on out, hook nose," a slurred voice called. "Just wanted to straighten that crooked thing on your face." Winifred's hand instinctively touched the bridge of her nose, the prominent curve that bent sharply to the right, a remnant of a childhood fall from a wagon that never healed properly. At 22, she had learned to live with the mockery, but it never stopped stinging. "That's enough, Davis." Martha, the saloon owner, shouted. "Get your sorry hide out of my establishment before I fetch the sheriff." Winifred remained crouched, listening as boots stomped across wooden floorboards toward the exit. Only when the batwing doors swung shut did she rise, brushing glass from her apron. "Don't you pay him no mind, Winnie," Martha said, her weathered face softening. "Men like that ain't worth the dirt under your fingernails." "I know," Winifred replied, though the familiar ache in her chest said otherwise. "I'll clean this up." As she swept the broken glass, Winifred caught her reflection in a shard hazel eyes, auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the profile that had made her the subject of ridicule since she was 12 years old. Some days she barely noticed it. Other days, like today, it felt like the only thing anyone saw. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Arizona sun painting the desert landscape in hues of gold and amber. Winifred wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out of the small room she rented above the general store. Her day off from the saloon stretched before her, and she intended to spend it picking wildflowers outside town, away from staring eyes and whispered comments. The main street was already bustling with morning activity, merchants opening shops, a stagecoach unloading passengers, cowboys leading horses to the livery. Winifred kept her head down, walking briskly past groups of people. She was nearly at the edge of town when she collided with something solid, or rather, someone. "Whoa there," a deep voice said as strong hands steadied her shoulders. Winifred looked up into the face of a stranger. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore trail-worn clothes and a dusty Stetson, the mark of a man who spent his life in the saddle. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, immediately angling her face so he couldn't see her profile. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "No harm done, miss," he replied, releasing her arms. "Name's Levi Parker, just rode into town." "Winifred Zimmerman," she responded automatically, then regretted giving her name. New arrivals always meant new mockery once they noticed her nose. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman." His eyes held hers without dropping to study her face, a courtesy she rarely experienced from strangers. "Could you point me to where I might find Sheriff Thompson? I'm expected." Winifred gestured down the street. 2 buildings past the bank. "The one with the blue door." "Much obliged." He tipped his hat and stepped aside to let her pass. As she continued toward the outskirts of town, Winifred couldn't help but glance back. The cowboy called Levi Parker was speaking with the blacksmith, who pointed toward the sheriff's office. There was something different about him, a steadiness, a quiet confidence that set him apart from the rowdy cowboys who frequented the saloon. Winifred shook the thought away. Men like that weren't interested in women like her. That was a lesson she'd learned all too well. The wildflowers were in full bloom across the desert floor, painting the landscape with splashes of yellow, purple, and white. Winifred gathered them carefully, creating a bouquet to brighten her small room. Out here, with only the whisper of wind and the occasional call of a hawk overhead, she could almost forget the taunts and stares. She sat beneath the shade of a mesquite tree, watching clouds drift across the vast blue sky. This was her sanctuary, this open space where no one judged her appearance. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke her reverie. Winifred tensed, ready to hide her face or flee if necessary. When she saw the rider, her heart skipped. It was the cowboy from town, Levi Parker. He slowed his horse, a handsome palomino, as he approached. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, raising a hand in greeting. "Didn't expect to find anyone out this way." "I come here often," she replied, standing and gathering her flowers, "to be alone, and I've interrupted your solitude." He dismounted with fluid grace. "My apologies." "It's fine," she said, though she turned slightly, presenting her left profile the good side, as she thought of it. "Are you lost?" he chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to settle in her chest. "No, madam, just getting the lay of the land. Sheriff Thompson's hired me as his deputy." Winifred's eyebrows rose. "Deputy? We haven't had one since Mr. Collins left for California last spring. Town's growing. Sheriff says he needs the help." Levi patted his horse's neck. "This old boy and I have been riding from town to town for a few years now. Thought it might be nice to stay put for a while. Cottonwood Springs isn't much," Winifred said, "but I suppose it has its charms." "I'm starting to see that," he replied, and something in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity or mockery, the looks she was accustomed to, but something else entirely. She turned away, uncomfortable under his gaze. "I should get back to town. May I escort you?" he asked. "These parts can be dangerous for a lady alone." "I'm quite capable," she said, perhaps more sharply than intended. "I don't doubt it," he said with a smile. "But my ma raised me to be a gentleman, and she'd turn in her grave if I let a lady walk back to town alone while I rode alongside." Winifred hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." Levi led his horse by the reins as they walked, matching his stride to hers. The silence between them was surprisingly comfortable. "Those are mighty pretty flowers," he commented after a while. "Thank you, they brighten my room. My mother loved wildflowers too. Said they were God's way of showing off." Winifred smiled despite herself. "A wise woman." "The wisest I ever knew," he agreed. "Taught me to see beauty in unexpected places." Something in his tone made her glance at him, but his expression revealed nothing beyond a wistful smile. As they neared town, Winifred grew tense again. She didn't want to be seen with the new deputy, didn't want him to hear the inevitable comments about her appearance. Better to establish distance now. "Thank you for walking with me, Deputy Parker, but I can manage from here." He studied her face, those storm-gray eyes seeming to see more than she wanted. "As you wish, Miss Zimmerman. I hope to see you around town." "I work evenings at the Dusty Rose," she said, then added hastily, "as a barmaid. I'll stop by sometime." He tipped his hat again. "Good day, Miss Zimmerman." Winifred watched him lead his horse toward the livery, a strange flutter in her chest that she quickly suppressed. Men like Levi Parker, handsome, kind-spoken men, never looked twice at women with faces like hers. Once he heard the jokes, saw the way others treated her, he'd keep his distance like all the rest. That evening at the saloon, Winifred moved efficiently between tables, delivering drinks and avoiding wandering hands. The usual crowd filled the room: miners, cowboys, businessmen seeking respite from the day's heat. She was wiping down the bar when the batwing doors swung open and Levi Parker walked in, now wearing a deputy's badge on his vest. The din of conversation dimmed slightly as patrons assessed the newcomer. "Evening, Martha," he greeted the owner. "Sheriff Thompson speaks highly of your establishment." "That old coot better," Martha laughed. "I've been pulling bullets out of his hide for 15 years. She gestured to an empty table. "First drinks on the house for our new deputy." Levi nodded his thanks and took a seat. His eyes found Winifred, and he offered a smile that made her stomach flutter traitorously. "Miss Zimmerman," he acknowledged. "Whiskey, if you please." She nodded and poured his drink, bringing it to his table with her eyes lowered. "Thank you kindly," he said as she set it down. She could feel eyes on them, curious stares from the regulars who rarely saw anyone treat her with such courtesy. It made her uncomfortable, this attention. "Is everything all right, Miss Zimmerman?" Levi asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Yes," she replied automatically. "Will there be anything else?" Before he could answer, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, deputy. Better watch out, that nose of hers might put your eye out if she turns too quick." It was Davis, the same man who'd thrown the bottle the previous night. Laughter erupted from his table of friends. Winifred's cheeks burned with humiliation. She started to turn away, to escape to the kitchen as she usually did when the mockery began, but Levi's hand gently caught her wrist. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "would you mind turning this way for a moment?" Confused and mortified, she reluctantly faced him, presenting her full profile. Levi studied her face thoughtfully, then nodded. "Just as I thought." "What?" she whispered, heart pounding with dread. "Perfect," he said simply. Then, rising to his feet, he addressed the room while still looking at her. "You know, where I come from, there's a belief that God gives special marks to those with the purest hearts. Seems Miss Zimmerman here was blessed indeed." The saloon fell silent. Winifred stood frozen, unable to process his words. Levi turned to face Davis and his companions, his expression hardening. "I'd appreciate it if you gentlemen would show the lady the respect she deserves, unless you'd prefer to discuss matters down at the jail." Davis muttered something under his breath, but the threat of a night in the cells was enough to silence him. Levi sat back down, taking a sip of his whiskey as if nothing had happened. "Fine establishment," he commented to Winifred, who still stood beside his table in shock. "I can see why the sheriff recommended it." She managed to nod before retreating to the bar, her mind whirling. No one had ever defended her like that before, and the way he had looked at her not with pity or disgust, but with genuine admiration was entirely new. For the rest of the evening no one mentioned her nose, though she caught many curious glances between her and the new deputy. When Levi finally left, tipping his hat to her on the way out, she felt an inexplicable sense of loss. "Well, well," Martha said, appearing at her side. "Seems our new deputy has taken a shine to you." "Don't be ridiculous," Winifred replied, scrubbing the bar with unnecessary vigor. "He was just being kind." "MMHMM," Martha hummed skeptically. "Kind enough to stare at you all evening when he thought no one was looking." Winifred shook her head, unwilling to entertain such foolish notions. Men like Levi Parker didn't court women like her. It was simply not the way of the world. Over the next 2 weeks, Levi became a regular sight around Cottonwood Springs. He patrolled the streets, broke up fights before they turned serious, and helped old Mrs. Henderson carry her groceries. The townsfolk quickly warmed to him, impressed by his fair but firm approach to keeping the peace. He visited the dusty rows most evenings, always sitting at the same table, always requesting that Winifred serve him. Their interactions remained polite but distant, at least on her part. She couldn't deny the way her pulse quickened when he entered the room, but she refused to mistake kindness for something more. The mockery about her nose had subsided in his presence, though she still caught whispers when he wasn't around. Some speculated that the deputy had lost his eyesight in one eye and couldn't see her profile properly. Others suggested he was merely being polite while he courted more attractive prospects. Winifred tried not to listen, tried not to care, but the words still stung. One afternoon, as she was walking back from the mercantile with supplies for the saloon, she heard rapid hoofbeats approaching from behind. Stepping to the side of the road, she turned to see Levi riding toward town at a gallop. His face was grim, his clothes dusty from hard riding. He reined in his horse when he saw her. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, "get inside somewhere safe. The Carson gang was spotted heading this way. Sheriff thinks they might hit the bank." The Carson gang, 3 brothers known for violent bank robberies across the territory. Their last raid had left 2 men dead in Prescott. "Are you going after them alone?" she asked, alarmed. "Sheriff's gathering a posse." Levi's expression was determined. "But I need to get back to town, warn folks." "Be careful," she said before she could stop herself. Something in his face softened. "I will." Then he spurred his horse onward. Winifred hurried back to the saloon, where Martha was already barring the doors after hearing the news from a passing rider. "That deputy of ours is going to get himself killed," Martha muttered as they peered through the windows. "Carson boys don't leave witnesses." The next hour passed in tense silence as Winifred, Martha, and the few patrons present listened for gunshots. Finally, they heard a commotion outside, horses, shouts, and then 3 distinct gunshots that made Winifred's heart seize in her chest. More shouting followed, then cheers. Martha cautiously opened the door to see what was happening. "They got him," announced a breathless young boy running past. Deputy Parker shot one in the shoulder and they surrendered. Winifred sagged against the bar in relief. People began to filter into the street as the sheriff and his men marched the captured outlaws toward the jail. She spotted Levi among them, his shirt torn at the shoulder with a streak of blood visible beneath. Without thinking, she rushed outside. "You're hurt," she said as she reached him. He looked surprised to see her. "Just a graze, I've had worse shaving." "Let me help," she insisted. "Martha keeps medical supplies at the saloon," the sheriff overheard. "Go on, Parker, get that looked at. I can handle these vermin." Levi hesitated, then nodded. "Much obliged, Sheriff." Inside the empty saloon, Winifred directed him to a chair and gathered bandages, alcohol, and clean water. Her hands trembled slightly as she helped him remove his vest and shirt, revealing a muscular torso marked with old scars and, at the shoulder, a fresh wound where a bullet had grazed him. "You're lucky," she said softly, cleaning the injury with gentle hands. "An inch to the left and you'd be in a grave." "Wouldn't be the first time luck's been on my side," he replied, watching her work. "Though I'd like to think it was more than luck today." "Oh," she applied the alcohol, apologizing when he winced. "Had something to come back for," he said simply. Winifred's hands stilled momentarily before she continued bandaging his shoulder. "The town is fortunate to have you," she said, deliberately misunderstanding. "Winnie." The diminutive of her name, spoken in his deep voice, sent a shiver through her. "Look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. "I wasn't talking about the town." Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Deputy Parker, Levi," he corrected. "My name is Levi." "Levi," she conceded. "You don't need to say such things." "I appreciate your kindness, but it's not kindness," he interrupted, his gaze intense. "And I'm not saying anything I don't mean." Winifred stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't know me." "I'd like to." He stood, towering over her. "If you'd let me." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why would you want to know someone like me when there are plenty of pretty girls in town without?" She gestured vaguely toward her nose. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Is that what you think? That I couldn't possibly be interested in you because of your nose?" Her silence was answer enough. Levi sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Winifred, do you know what I see when I look at you?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "I see a woman with courage enough to face mockery every day and still hold her head high. I see kindness in how you help Martha, gentleness in how you tend flowers. I see intelligence in your eyes and grace in how you move." He took a step closer. "And yes, I see beauty not in spite of your nose, but including it." Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "You can't mean that." "My father used to say that some people are born with a map on their face pointing the way home," he said softly. "The first time I saw you, I knew what he meant." Winifred blinked, a tear escaping down her cheek. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your nose," his hand gently traced the air near her profile, not quite touching, "points me home every time, and I'd be honored if you'd let me follow it." A small, fragile hope blossomed in her chest. "You're not ashamed to be seen with me?" Levi's expression grew serious. "The only shame would be in letting other people's cruelty keep me from the woman who's captured my thoughts since the moment I rode into town." Before she could respond, the saloon door opened and Martha entered, followed by several townspeople eager to hear about the capture of the Carson gang. The moment between them shattered, but the look Levi gave her as others surrounded him held a promise that made her cheeks flush. That night, Winifred couldn't sleep. She replayed Levi's words over and over, afraid to believe them yet unwilling to dismiss them entirely. Could a man like him truly care for a woman like her? Or was this some elaborate kindness, a pity that would fade once he met someone more suitable? The next morning, she rose early and headed to her favorite spot outside town, needing the solitude to sort through her confused feelings. The desert was peaceful in the dawn light, wildflowers opening to greet the sun. She had been sitting beneath her usual mesquite tree for perhaps an hour when she heard the now familiar sound of Levi's palomino approaching. Her heart leapt even as anxiety coiled in her stomach. "Thought I might find you here," he said as he dismounted. "Mind if I join you?" She nodded, making room beside her on the blanket she'd spread. Levi sat, removing his hat and placing it beside him. "I wanted to apologize if I overstepped yesterday. It wasn't my intention to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," she said quickly. I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" She gestured helplessly. "Why me? There are women in town who are beautiful, unmarked, women whose families have money or land. Why would you say those things to someone like me?" Levi was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert landscape. "When I was 16, he finally said, I fell in love with a girl in my hometown. Mary Ellen Blackburn, the banker's daughter, prettiest girl in 3 counties, everyone said." Winifred's heart sank. Of course he had loved someone beautiful. "She seemed sweet on me too," he continued. "We courted for nearly a year. I saved every penny to buy her a ring." A shadow crossed his face. "Then I overheard her talking to her friends, said she was just passing time with me until someone better came along. Someone with prospects," she said. "Called me a handsome fool who'd never amount to anything but a ranch hand." "I'm sorry," Winifred said softly. He shrugged. "It taught me something important, beauty the kind that's just skin deep it fades, and it often hides a cruel heart." His eyes found hers. "But kindness, courage, honor, those things grow more beautiful with time. And you think I have those things? I know you do. I've watched how you handle the cruelty directed at you, how you care for others even when they've been unkind. That's the kind of beauty that matters." Hope unfurled in her chest, fragile but persistent. "And my nose," a slow smile spread across his face. "I meant what I said yesterday. It points me home." He hesitated, then reached out to gently trace the curve of her profile. "May I tell you something my grandfather used to say?" She nodded, breathless at his touch. He said God never makes mistakes, that every curve, every mark, every difference serves a purpose. Your nose, it's distinctive. Memorable. I'd know you in a crowd of thousands just from your silhouette against the sunset. Tears welled in Winifred's eyes. No one had ever spoken about her this way. "I'm not asking for promises," Levi said, his hand dropping to take hers. "Just a chance. Let me court you properly, Winifred Zimmerman. Let me show you how I see you." She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception or pity, but found only sincerity and warmth. Slowly, she nodded. "I'd like that." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "May I kiss you, Winnie? I've been thinking about it since the day we met." Heart pounding, she nodded again. Levi leaned forward, his hand gently cradling her cheek as his lips met hers in a kiss so tender it made her eyes sting with tears. When he pulled back, the look of wonder on his face was enough to banish the last of her doubts. Word spread quickly through Cottonwood Springs that Deputy Parker was courting Winifred Zimmerman. Some expressed surprise, others skepticism, but Levi's obvious devotion silenced most critics. He escorted her to church on Sundays, brought her wildflowers, and visited the saloon every evening, though he drank little, preferring to watch her work and walk her home afterward. The mockery about her nose faded to occasional whispers, then stopped entirely when Levi knocked a man unconscious for making a particularly cruel joke at Winifred's expense. The sheriff merely shrugged when asked if he'd arrest his deputy for the incident. "Man had it coming," was all he said. 3 months after their first kiss under the mesquite tree, Levi proposed. They married in the small church, with Martha as Winifred's matron of honor and the sheriff standing up for Levi. The entire town attended, many genuinely happy for the couple who had defied expectations. "You know," Levi whispered as they danced at their wedding celebration, "I never thanked that nose of yours properly." "For what?" Winifred asked, smiling up at her husband, "for leading me to the most beautiful woman I've ever known." He kissed the bridge of her nose gently. "My true north." My way home. 5 years later, Levi and Winifred Parker stood on the porch of their ranch house outside Cottonwood Springs, watching their twin daughters chase fireflies in the twilight. Levi had left his deputy position after 2 years, using his savings to purchase land and start a horse ranch that was now thriving. "Mama," 4-year-old Emma called. "Look what I caught. Careful with it, darling," Winifred replied, smiling as her daughter gently cupped the glowing insect. "She has your nose," Levi said softly, his arm around his wife's waist. Winifred touched her profile self-consciously. "Poor child." "Lucky child," he corrected, kissing her temple. "Beautiful just like her mother." Their other daughter, Sarah, ran up the porch steps. "Papa, tell us the story again." "Which story is that?" Levi asked, though he knew perfectly well. "About Mama's nose and how it showed you the way home." Both girls chorused. Winifred laughed, leaning into her husband's embrace. The mockery that had once defined her life was now a distant memory, replaced by love so profound it still took her breath away. "Well," Levi began, gathering his family close, "it all started when I rode into a dusty little town and bumped into the most remarkable woman I'd ever seen." As he retold their story, embellished slightly for their daughters' benefit, Winifred watched his animated face in the fading light. The years had only deepened her love for this man who had seen beauty where others saw only imperfection. In the distance, the first stars appeared above the desert landscape. Winifred looked up at them, then at her family, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Her crooked nose had finally led her home.